She was thrown out by her husband for being unable to give him an heir. Then a Mafia boss said, "You're coming with me." The November wind tore through the empty streets of Chicago like a blade wrapped in ice, carrying a cold that sank into skin and settled deep in the bones. Streetlights buzzed and flickered above rain-slicked sidewalks, casting long, restless shadows across cracked pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and faded into nothing. On a rusted bench at a deserted bus stop, a young woman sat hunched over, arms wrapped so tightly around herself she looked like she was trying to hold her own pieces together. Her thin coat barely reached her elbows, knees pulled to her chest, shoulders curled inward. She looked like she was trying to disappear, like she wanted the night to swallow her whole. In her trembling hands, she clutched a small silver ring, the band worn and scratched from years of wear. It was all she had left, her mother's, the last thread connecting her to something that once felt like love. Her name was Vivien Cole, 27 years old, brown hair tangled and dull, blue-gray eyes hollow and distant, a faded bruise circling her left wrist like a shadow that refused to leave. Lately, her name didn't feel like hers. Not after her husband screamed it at her like a curse. Useless, broken, defective. Before shoving her out the front door and locking it behind her. That had been 3 nights ago. Or maybe 4. Time had blurred into a fog she couldn't see through. She had not eaten. She had not slept. A crumpled bus ticket carried her from Pennsylvania to a Chicago terminal. But once she arrived, she had nowhere to go. So she walked the city streets. Someone had stolen her bag at a gas station outside the city. Her phone, her wallet, her last $20, everything gone. Now she sat in the dark, lips cracked and bleeding, body aching in places she had stopped counting, stomach hollow, chest emptier. The scar on her wrist throbbed with the cold, a permanent reminder of the night Tyler had gripped her so hard the bruise never fully healed. She had lost 2 babies, 2. The first, she mourned. The second, she bled out alone on the bathroom floor while Tyler watched television in the next room. He never took her to the hospital. He said she wasn't worth the bill. After that, something inside her stopped trying to survive. There's nothing left, she thought, fingers tightening around the ring until the metal bit into her palm. Nothing worth holding on to. She didn't cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus, staring at her own reflection in a rain-streaked window. The woman looking back at her was a stranger. Sunken cheeks, empty eyes, a ghost wearing her skin. The wind cut sharper. She pulled her coat tighter, but it didn't help. The cold was inside her now. Then, headlights appeared. A black Escalade, sleek and silent, slowed at the corner, then stopped. The rear door opened. Footsteps approached, measured, unhurried, the click of expensive shoes on wet concrete, and then a voice. Low, calm, dangerous in a way that wasn't threatening, just absolute. "You're going to freeze to death out here." She didn't move, didn't look up. Her body had learned long ago that men who approached in the dark rarely brought anything good. But this voice didn't demand. It waited. Slowly, she lifted her head. The man stood a few feet away. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair pushed back from a face that looked like it had been carved from stone and softened only by exhaustion. His eyes, deep brown, almost black, held no pity, no judgment, just recognition. Like he knew exactly what it looked like to lose everything. He shrugged off his coat, a long black wool that probably cost more than a year of her old rent, and held it out to her. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't take it. "Why would you help me?" He was quiet for a moment, his gaze dropping to the ring clutched in her hands, to the bruise on her wrist, to the way she flinched even though he hadn't moved. "Because I know what it looks like when someone's been thrown away," he said. "And I know what it feels like to have nothing left to lose." He draped the coat over her shoulders without touching her. It was still warm. It smelled like sandalwood and smoke and something she couldn't name. Safety, maybe. Or danger dressed up as kindness. "My name is Dominic Rossi." The name hit her like a cold wave. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Whispered it in back rooms and newspaper headlines. The Rossi family. Old money. Older blood. The kind of power that didn't come from boardrooms. She should have been afraid. But fear required energy she no longer had. "There's a place not far from here," he continued, his voice never rising, never pushing. "Warm, safe. I have 3 children who need someone, and you need somewhere to go." She stared at him. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I'm offering you a door. You can walk through it, or you can stay here and let the cold finish what he started." Her fingers tightened around the ring. She thought of Tyler, of the bathroom floor, of the 2 lives that had slipped out of her before they ever had a chance. She thought of her mother, who had worn this ring until the day she died, who had whispered to a teenage Vivien, "When you have nothing left, that's when you find out who you really are." She looked at the man standing in front of her, a stranger, a dangerous man, a man who, for reasons she didn't understand, had stopped, and slowly, painfully, she stood. She didn't take his hand, but she followed. If Vivien's story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope, survival, and second chances to life. Stay tuned. The journey is just beginning. The Escalade glided smoothly through empty streets, and the streetlights cast their glow across the windows like faint, hazy streaks of light. Vivien sat silent in the back seat, still wrapped in Dominic's coat, the lingering scent of sandalwood and cigarette smoke drifting around her like a strangely protective veil. Up front, a bald man with shoulders broad as a wall drove without a word, occasionally studying her in the rearview mirror with an appraising look that was watchful but not hostile. Dominic sat beside her, quiet, gazing out the window, asking nothing, pressing nothing, as if her presence were the most ordinary thing in the world. About 15 minutes later, the car stopped in front of a small restaurant tucked into a hidden alley. An old wooden sign read La Famiglia in faded, handwritten lettering, and inside, a warm, dim light spilled through fogged glass panes. Dominic opened the car door, did not offer his hand, simply stood and waited. Vivien stepped down on her own, her legs trembling on the wet pavement. The restaurant door swung open, and an elderly Italian man with snow-white hair and a stooped back came out to greet them. When he saw Dominic, he bowed deeply, almost folding in on himself. "Signor Rossi," he said in a trembling voice heavy with reverence, "it is an honor to welcome you." Dominic only gave a slight nod, set a hand on the old man's back in a familiar gesture, and led Vivien inside. The restaurant was nearly empty. Only one man sat in a distant corner, sipping from a glass, his eyes flicking toward them before he quickly lowered his gaze. Vivien recognized that look. It was not curiosity, it was fear. It was the kind of respect reserved for someone with power. She watched quietly the way the owner pulled out Dominic's chair, the way he lowered his voice when speaking to the server, the way everyone in that room tried not to meet the eyes of the man seated across from her. Dominic Rossi was not merely a name, he was a force. They sat facing each other in the most secluded corner of the restaurant. Dominic ordered chicken soup, hot bread, and warm water without asking her opinion. Vivien did not protest. She no longer had the strength to protest anything. While they waited for the food, she caught her own reflection in an old mirror hanging on the wall. The woman staring back at her was a ghost. Tangled hair, hollowed cheeks, blue-gray eyes reduced to 2 empty pits. The bruise on her wrist stood out under the yellow light. She looked like something that had been discarded, because she had been. The soup arrived. Steam rose from the bowl, and the familiar smell made her stomach twist. She lifted the spoon, her hand shaking so badly she nearly spilled it. They ate in silence. Dominic did not ask where she had come from, did not ask who she was, did not ask what had happened. He simply sat there, occasionally taking a sip of coffee, his gaze fixed on the window as though his mind were somewhere far away. After a while, he spoke, his voice low and tired. "I have 3 children. My wife died 3 years ago." Vivien looked up, startled. Dominic did not look at her. He stared into his coffee as if speaking to himself. "Since then, I have tried to do everything. Father, mother, protector. But I am not good at those things. The children need someone, not someone to replace their mother, just someone who is there." He fell silent, then looked at her for the first time since they sat down. "And you?" Vivien lowered her gaze. The words lodged in her throat, yet there was something in his eyes, in the way he asked without demanding, that made her speak the words she had thought she buried forever. "I cannot keep them," she said, her voice raw and hoarse. "I lost 2, and because of that, I was thrown out onto the street like a broken thing." Dominic showed no pity, no practiced, artificial sorrow the kind she had grown used to. He only looked at her, then said with a steady certainty, "You were not thrown away, you escaped." Vivien blinked. No one had ever spoken to her like that. He leaned forward. "I need someone to help care for the children. You need a place to stay. No ties, no conditions. You can leave whenever you want." She looked at him, her heart beating slowly inside an empty chest. Why, she asked for the second time that night. "Why are you helping me?" Dominic was silent for a long time. Then he said, so softly she almost did not hear him, because I know what it feels like to stand in the dark and have no reason left to keep going. Vivien did not answer. She looked down at the bowl of soup, now half-cooled. Then she lifted the spoon and kept eating, one spoonful at a time, until it was gone. It was the first time in many days she had finished a meal. And when she set the spoon down, she nodded, just a small nod, but it was all Dominic needed. The car left the city center behind, gliding through streets that grew quieter and emptier, the streetlights thinning out until there was only darkness, and towering rows of trees on either side of the road. Vivien stared through the window, watching the world slide past like a blurred dream. She did not know where she was going. She was not even sure she still cared. About 20 minutes later, the Escalade slowed and stopped before an enormous iron gate. 2 massive stone pillars rose into the night, crowned with bronze lions frozen mid-snarl in the shadows. Security cameras were fixed at every angle, infrared lights blinking red like eyes that never stopped watching. A man dressed in black stepped out from a guard booth, bowed his head when he recognized the vehicle, and hurried to open the gate. Vivien felt her heart begin to beat faster. This was not the home of an ordinary businessman. This was a fortress. The car rolled forward along a long stretch of stone paving, gardens trimmed into neat order on both sides even in the middle of winter. Then the mansion came into view, 3 stories high, built in a classic Italian style with white stone columns, curved balconies, tall, narrow windows. Warm, yellow light spilled from within, yet it did nothing to soften the building's cold, commanding presence. It was beautiful, but it was the beauty of power, not the beauty of welcome. Dominic opened the door and stepped out first. You need to know, he said, his voice low and clear in the still night. You will be safe here. No one gets in without my permission. Vivien stepped down, her feet meeting the cold stone. She looked up at the house, then at the men in black positioned throughout the grounds, their eyes sliding over her before turning away as if she were only a minor detail. She understood. This was Dominic Rossi's world, a world she had never known, and perhaps should never have entered. But she was here now, and she had nowhere else to go. The front door opened before they even reached the steps. A middle-aged woman stood there, full-figured, black hair threaded with gray neatly pinned at the nape of her neck, a face stern but not unkind. She wore simple, clean clothes, and her sharp brown eyes swept Vivien from head to toe, not judging, only assessing. This is Rosa Martinez, Dominic said. She runs everything in this house. Rosa, this is Vivien. She will be staying. Rosa nodded, her gaze pausing for a brief moment on the bruise at Vivien's wrist before she looked away. Follow me, she said, her voice warmer than her appearance suggested. Vivien glanced at Dominic. He gave a slight nod, then turned and walked toward the opposite hallway, his tall figure dissolving into shadow. Vivien followed Rosa through a vast entryway, the marble floor icy beneath her thin shoes. The furnishings were luxurious and costly. Oil paintings lined the walls. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Yet something was missing. There was no laughter, no scent of food, no sign of life. The house was beautiful like a museum, and cold like a tomb. They climbed the stairs and moved down a long corridor lined with closed doors that seemed to hold their silence inside. Rosa stopped at a room at the end of the hall, opened the door, and stepped aside. Your room, she said. There is a lock from the inside. No one can come in if you do not want them to. Vivien stepped in, and her breath caught. The room was not large, but it was warm. A double bed dressed in crisp white sheets, a thick comforter, soft pillows, cream-colored curtains, a small table by the window, a bedside lamp casting a gentle golden glow. Another door led to a private bathroom. It was the most beautiful room she had ever seen in her life, and it was meant for her. She stood there, not knowing what to do, not knowing what to say. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned. Dominic stood in the doorway, his face still unreadable, but his eyes softened slightly. Rest tonight, he said. Tomorrow, you will meet the children. Then he turned away, his footsteps fading down the hall. Rosa looked at her one more time and quietly closed the door. Vivien stood alone in the stillness of the room. She went to the bed, trembling fingers brushing the sheet. Soft, clean, real. She touched the pillows, the blanket, as if afraid they might vanish. Then she stepped into the bathroom. The light snapped on, painfully bright, and she saw herself in the mirror, a walking skeleton, hair snarled like a bird's nest, face ashen, lips cracked, eyes sunken and lifeless. The bruise on her wrist looked like a curse that could not be erased. This was what Tyler had turned her into, This was what remained after 4 years of hell. And for the first time in days, Vivien cried, not with sobs, only tears spilling down in silence, unending, like a dam breaking after too long under strain. She cried for the 2 children who would never be born. She cried for the mother she had lost. She cried for the young girl who once believed in love and was crushed for that belief. She cried until there were no tears left. Then she showered. Warm water streamed over her, washing away road dust, washing away cold sweat, washing away a piece of the dark memory. She stood beneath the spray until her skin flushed, until steam fogged the room. When she stepped out, she found clean sleepwear laid on the bed. Rosa had left it there. She put it on, the soft cotton touching her skin like an embrace. Then she climbed into bed, pulled the blanket up to her chest, and clenched her mother's silver ring in her fist. For the first time in a long time, she lay on a real bed. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. And in the warm darkness of the unfamiliar room, Vivien Cole slipped into sleep. Sunlight slipped through the curtains and laid a warm golden stripe across Vivien's face. She jolted awake, heart pounding hard and fast, sitting bolt upright in panic, her eyes sweeping the unfamiliar room while her mind took a few seconds to catch up. White sheets, a soft blanket, cream curtains, not the dark apartment in Pennsylvania, not Tyler. She was in Dominic Rossi's house. She was still safe. Her breathing slowly steadied. She looked down at her hand, her mother's silver ring still resting neatly in her palm, pressed so tightly it had left a red mark in her skin. She had slept through the night without nightmares, something so rare she had nearly forgotten it could happen at all. She got up, washed her face, and brushed her hair with the comb Rosa had left on the table. In the mirror, she still looked terrible, but not as bad as last night. At least her eyes were no longer bloodshot. At least she had gotten one real night of rest. She opened the door and stepped into the quiet hallway. In daylight, the house was no less imposing, but natural light softened its chill. She followed the smell of food down the stairs, through the enormous living room, and found the kitchen. Rosa stood at the stove, turning eggs in a pan. She looked back at the sound of footsteps and nodded in greeting. "Sleep well?" she asked, her voice still low but no longer as distant as it had been the night before. Vivien nodded. "Better than I have in a long time." Rosa set a plate of eggs and toast in front of her, then poured a glass of orange juice. "Eat. You will need your strength." Vivien sat and began to eat. The food was so good it nearly made her cry. She could not remember the last time she had been given a proper breakfast. While Vivien ate, Rosa leaned against the counter, arms folded across her chest. "I should tell you about the children before you meet them," she said. Vivien looked up and listened. "Marco is the oldest, 9 years old. He is difficult to get close to, cold. He trusts no one since his mother died. He has driven away 4 nannies in the past 2 years. Rosa paused and let out a tired breath. "Isabella, everyone calls her Bella, 6 years old. Sensitive, cries easily, often has nightmares. She does not talk much, but she watches everything. And Leo, 4 years old, he is the sweetest one, open, always smiling. But he is also the one who remembers their mother the least because he was too small when it happened." Vivien swallowed a bite of toast and her throat tightened without warning. "It happened. Can you tell me about it?" she asked softly. "About their mother." Rosa was silent for a long time, her gaze drifting toward the window. "Lucia, she was the best person I ever knew. Beautiful, gentle. She loved those children more than anything in the world. She died 3 years ago. The shooting. They were aiming for Mr. Dominic, but she was the one who was hit, right in front of the children." Vivien felt her stomach twist. She understood now. She understood why the house felt so cold, why Dominic carried the eyes of a man who had lost everything, why the children needed someone yet could not bring themselves to trust anyone. Before she could speak, the sound of running feet thundered down the hallway. Thump, 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 and then a little boy burst into the kitchen like a tiny whirlwind. Brown curls stuck out in every direction. Big round eyes, the color of bright brown sugar, cheeks full and rosy. He wore pajamas printed with superheroes, dinosaur socks on his feet. He stopped short when he saw Vivien. His eyes widened even more and his mouth fell open. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice small and curious. "Are you a princess? You look sad like the princesses in movies." Vivien blinked, caught off guard, and then, for the first time in a long time, she smiled. It was small and weak, but it was real. "No, I am just Vivien." The boy tilted his head. "Vivi. Can I call you Vivi?" She nodded. "Of course." The boy grinned wide, showing the gap where a front tooth had recently fallen out. I am Leo. I am 4. Do you like superheroes? I like superheroes. My dad is a superhero too, but he does not wear a cape. Rosa gently slid a plate of pastries toward him. Sit down and eat, Leo. Do not bother Miss Vivien. Leo climbed onto the chair beside Vivien, his legs swinging because they could not reach the floor. He looked at her with an expression that held no caution at all, clear as a sky after rain. Another small figure appeared in the kitchen doorway. A little girl with long black hair and big brown eyes, shy and half hidden behind the frame, watching Vivien through the narrow gap. Bella, Rosa called softly. Come in and say hello to Miss Vivien, sweetheart. The girl did not answer. She only stood there, watching, like a small deer deciding whether a stranger was dangerous. Vivien did not push her. She only offered the girl a gentle smile, then turned back to her own plate. She understood that feeling, the fear of new people. And then another voice cut through the air, cold and sharp. Who are you? Vivien looked up. A boy stood in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, eyes narrowed with suspicion. He was taller than the other two, his hair black like Dominic's, his face already angular though he was only 9. His gaze swept over Vivien as if measuring an enemy. Another new nanny, he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. How long will you last? A month? 2 weeks? Vivien set her fork down and met his eyes directly. No flinching, no fear. I did not come here to replace anyone. Marco went still for a second, then let out a scornful laugh. Fine, because no one can replace her. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing hard on the stone floor. Leo watched his brother go, then looked back at Vivien, worry on his face. Marco does not like anyone. He is very sad. Vivien looked at the youngest boy and felt her heart tighten. She understood. She understood the anger, the pain hiding under that hard shell. She had been that way once too. Heavy footsteps sounded behind her. She turned. Dominic stood in the kitchen doorway, leaning a shoulder against the frame, his gaze taking in the scene. His eyes paused on Vivien for a moment. Then he gave a small nod, just a nod. But she understood. It was encouragement. It was him telling her she had done well, and somehow that meant more than any compliment she had ever been given. A week passed. Vivien slowly found a rhythm inside this unfamiliar mansion. Each morning, she woke before the sun and went down to the kitchen to help Rosa prepare breakfast. She learned how to warm Leo's milk to exactly the right temperature, how to cut bread into star shapes because Bella would only eat bread shaped like stars, and how to put Marco's eggs on a separate plate because he did not like his food touching itself. Small things, but she remembered every one of them. After breakfast, she took the children to school. Vin drove, and she sat in the back with all 3 of them. Leo always sat beside her, his hand gripping the sleeve of her shirt, as if afraid she might disappear. He talked without stopping, about superheroes, about dinosaurs, about the turtle he had seen in a book, about everything that raced through his small mind. Vivien listened to every word, not because she had to, but because that young, unguarded voice was the most beautiful sound she had heard in years. In the afternoon, she picked them up, brought them home, and helped with homework. Leo was still too little to have real assignments, so he sat beside her, scribbling on paper and declaring it was a superhero flying through the sky. Bella did her work in silence, occasionally glancing at Vivien through the curtain of her long black hair. The girl did not speak to her, but she no longer hid behind doors either. Sometimes Bella would place a drawing on the table near Vivien and run away before Vivien could even say thank you. Simple drawings, flowers, butterflies, a house. Vivien kept them all, stacking them neatly in a desk drawer like small treasures. Marco, on the other hand, completely ignored her existence. He got up early on his own, prepared his own things, did his homework by himself. When Vivien brought him food, he did not look at her. When she asked if he needed help, he answered no in a cold voice and shut his bedroom door. Vivien did not push. Each night she simply left his meal outside his door, quietly folded his clean clothes and set them on his bed while he was at school, quietly checked whether he had eaten, whether he had slept, whether he was sick. She did not wait for gratitude. She did not need it. She only needed to know that the 9-year-old boy carrying pain too large for his body was all right. Then, one night, she heard crying. Vivien startled awake, her heart racing. It was small, strangled, sobbing, as if someone were trying to choke it back. She threw off the blanket and ran into the hall. The sound came from Bella's room. She pushed the door open, and the dim glow of the nightlight fell over the little girl's face, wet with tears. Bella sat on the bed, arms wrapped around a pillow, her body trembling. "Mama," the child whispered. "Mama, do not go." Vivien's heart clenched. She moved closer, but she did not touch her. She knew that feeling, the fear of being touched when you are raw and breaking. She sat down beside the bed, keeping just enough distance for Bella to know she was there, but not close enough to feel like a threat. And she began to sing, a lullaby her mother used to sing every night before she died. Vivien could not remember all the words, but the melody was still there, carved deep into her memory. Her voice was small and rough and not pretty at all, but she sang anyway, line by line, word by word. Bella slowly stopped shaking. The tears still ran, but the crying stopped. The girl looked at Vivien with red-rimmed eyes, exhausted, confused. Then a small hand reached out, touched Vivien's hand, and held tight. Vivien stopped singing. She looked down at the tiny hand gripping hers, the fingers soft and warm. She did not move. She did not speak. She just sat there and let Bella hold on, until the girl's breathing became even, until those eyes finally closed. Bella fell asleep, but her hand did not let go. Vivien stayed there all night, her back against the side of the bed, her eyes on the darkness beyond the window. She did not sleep, but she was not tired. For the first time in her life, she felt needed. The next morning, while Vivien was preparing breakfast, a small figure appeared beside her. Bella, the girl, stood there, fidgeting with the hem of her skirt, her eyes fixed on the floor. Then she looked up, her voice as small as breath. "Will you stay?" Vivien knelt until she was level with the child's face. She looked into those brown eyes, waiting and afraid and hoping all at once, and she answered, her voice gentle but sure, "As long as you want me here." Bella studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled. The first smile Vivien had seen on that face, small and fragile, but real, and it meant more than everything. One evening, after the children had been put to bed, Vivien went downstairs to the kitchen for a glass of water. The house lay still in the dark, with only a spill of light glowing from the far end of the ground floor hallway, Dominic's office. She had no intention of prying. She was only passing by. But the door was slightly ajar, and the tense voices drifting out slowed her steps. Dominic sat behind his desk, his face cold as stone. Vin stood nearby with his arms crossed. And there were 3 other men she had never seen before, all in black suits, their eyes sharp as knives. They were speaking Italian, fast and harsh. Vivien did not understand much, but she heard a name repeated again and again, Moretti, and another word, minaccia, threat. Dominic's voice cut through them, ice cold and heavy with authority. He said something that silenced the room at once. Then his gaze swept toward the door and stopped on Vivien. She froze, her heart hammering. Dominic was not angry. He only looked at her for a brief moment, then gave a small nod toward the hallway. "Go." Vivien turned and walked away, her steps quicker than usual. She did not get the water after all. She went straight back to her room, shut the door, sat on the bed, and tried to bring her ragged breathing under control. She knew Dominic Rossi was not an ordinary man. She had known it since the first night, from the way people bowed their heads to him, from the armed men posted everywhere. But she had forced herself not to think about it, until now. The next morning, after the children had gone to school, Vivien found Rosa in the kitchen. Rosa was drying dishes with her back turned. "I want to ask you something," Vivien said, her voice quiet but steady. Rosa did not turn around. "About Mr. Dominic?" Vivien nodded even though Rosa could not see her. "About this family, the Rossi family. Who are they really?" Rosa set the dish down and let out a weary breath. Then she turned, her brown eyes meeting Vivien's directly. No avoidance, no hiding. "Mr. Dominic is a powerful man," she said slowly. "Not all of it is legal, but he protects his family, at any cost. That is all you need to know." Vivien swallowed. "You mean he is Mafia?" Rosa did not deny it. She only looked at Vivien with calm eyes. "The Rossi family has controlled Chicago for 3 generations. Mr. Dominic did not choose this life, but he was born into it, and he does what must be done to protect the people he loves." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Vivien's feet. Mafia. She was living in the house of a Mafia boss. She was caring for the children of a man who might have killed, who might be hunted by enemies, who might pull her into danger simply by keeping her here. Her first instinct was to run, to gather her few belongings, walk out the door, and never look back. She had escaped once. She could do it again. But then she looked out the window. Leo was playing in the garden, chasing a butterfly, his laughter bright and clear. Bella sat on a stone bench with her head bent over her drawing, black hair falling like a curtain over her face, and Marco stood alone beneath a tree, reading, his shoulders hunched as if he carried the whole world on his back. 3 children, without a mother, afraid, broken, like her. They did not choose this life, she thought, the way she had never chosen her own. She looked down at her hand, the faint scar on her wrist, her mother's silver ring catching the sunlight with a soft shine. What had her mother always said? When you have nothing left, that is when you learn who you truly are. She had nothing left, but she could be something for these children. She turned to Rosa. I will stay. Rosa studied her for a long moment, then nodded, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. For the children, Vivien nodded. For the children. Not for Dominic. Not for this luxurious house. Not for the false promise of safety. But for 3 broken children who needed someone to stay. And this time, she would be that person. 2 weeks passed. Marco was still a wall. The 9-year-old treated Vivien as if she were a ghost, looking right through her, walking past her without so much as a glance. The plates of food she left outside his door were always eaten, but he never said thank you. The clothes she folded neatly on his bed were worn, but he never acknowledged she had done it. Vivien did not push. She did not try to start conversations, did not try to befriend him, did not try to crack the shell he had built. She simply did her work in silence, preparing meals, cleaning rooms, checking homework, making sure he was safe from a distance. She understood Marco better than anyone. She understood that anger, that pain, the way a child builds a wall around the heart so no one can hurt it again. She had been that child. After her mother died, she had closed the door on her own heart for years. Late one afternoon, after Leo had fallen asleep for his nap and Bella was drawing in her room, Vivien went out to the garden to breathe fresh air, and she saw Marco. He sat alone on a stone bench beneath a large maple tree, his back curved, his head bowed. In his hand was a phone, the screen glowing in the shade. Vivien stopped. She stood close enough to see what he was looking at. A photograph. The woman in the picture had long black hair and a radiant smile, holding a tiny boy in her arms, Lucia. And Marco, when he was little, he was staring at his mother. Vivien felt her heart tighten. She did not go closer. She knew that if she did, he would stand and leave at once. Instead, she quietly sat down on another stone bench a few yards away, turning her face in the other direction, as if she had only come out by chance to look at the trees. She said nothing. She did not look at him. She simply sat there. Minutes passed. A light wind moved through the leaves, a soft rustle overhead. The late afternoon sun gentled, laying long shadows across the green lawn. Vivien thought he would leave. He always left, but he did not. Then a small voice broke the quiet. My mother used to sit there. Vivien turned her head. Marco was not looking at her. He kept his eyes on the phone, his finger brushing the photo. Right there where you are sitting, he continued, his voice low and far away. Every afternoon, she came out here to read. She said this was the quietest corner of the house. Vivien did not move. She was afraid that if she moved, the moment would burst like a soap bubble. Do you want me to move? She asked softly. Marco was silent for a long time. Then he shook his head. No. Silence again. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of flowers from somewhere deeper in the garden. My mother used to sing to us every night, Marco said, and suddenly his voice caught. A lullaby in Italian. My grandmother taught her. She taught it to us. He stopped and swallowed. Now it is so quiet. No one sings anymore. Vivien felt her eyes burn. She looked at the 9-year-old boy trying to hold back grief far too big for his age, and she saw herself in him. I cannot replace your mother, she said gently. I will not try. Marco looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time. Not with the cold stare she had come to expect, but with the gaze of a child waiting to be abandoned. But I can sit here, she went on, with you, if you want. Marco did not answer. He looked back down at the phone, his finger still resting on his mother's image. But he did not stand. He did not walk away, and Vivien did not either. They sat there, 2 strangers with wounds that had not healed, in the quiet garden, until the sun slipped below the horizon, until the sky turned from orange to purple and then to deep blue, until Rosa called them in for dinner. That night, when Vivien passed Marco's room, as she always did to check in, she noticed something different. The door was not shut tight. It was cracked open, just a narrow gap, warm yellow light spilling from inside. It was the first time. She stood there for a moment, her heart beating slow and steady. Then she turned away. Rosa waited for her at the end of the hall, and something glimmered in her eyes. That boy has not spoken about his mother to anyone, she said quietly. For 3 years. Not a word. Vivien looked at her, not knowing what to say. You did something, Rosa said, her voice warmer than usual. I do not know what, but you did. Vivien looked back toward the door cracked open at the end of the hall. A small opening, but it was a beginning. And sometimes a beginning is all that is needed. Late one night, Vivien could not sleep. She lay on the bed staring at the ceiling while old memories returned like waves that never asked permission. Tyler's face, his shouting, a door slamming shut, blood on the bathroom floor. She sat up, cold sweat soaking the back of her shirt. She needed to get out of this room. She needed air. She went down to the kitchen, barefoot on the cold stone floor. The house was drowned in darkness, only moonlight slipping through the windows and laying silver bands across the marble. But when she stepped into the kitchen, she realized she was not the only one still awake. Dominic sat at the dining table in the dark, a glass of liquor in his hand, a half-emptied bottle of whiskey in front of him. He had not turned on a light. He only sat there, staring into nothing, like a lonely statue. Vivien froze in the doorway, not knowing whether to move forward or back. Then his voice came, low and tired. You cannot sleep either, Vivien blinked. It was not a question meant to send her away. It was an invitation to stay. She walked in, poured herself a glass of water, and sat in the chair across from him, not too close, not too far, enough space for both of them to keep what was theirs. They sat in silence, not uncomfortable, not strained, just two people carrying wounds too heavy for sleep, sharing the dark together. He was the one who broke it first. Lucia, he said, his voice like it had been worn down by sand. My wife. She died because of me. Vivien said nothing. She only listened. That day was Marco's 6th birthday. She was driving to the restaurant to meet me, with the kids in the car. He paused, his fingers tightening around the glass. They were aiming for me. The Moretti family. They wanted me dead so they could take the territory. But they shot the wrong car. Vivien felt the blood in her body turn cold. I ran out into the street when I heard the gunshots. She was there on the sidewalk, blood everywhere. The kids were still in the car, screaming, crying. Marco saw it all. Dominic's voice broke at the end of the sentence. I held her until the ambulance came, but it was too late. She died in my arms, in front of my son. Vivien felt her eyes sting. She wanted to say something, but there were no words large enough, and phrases like I am sorry or I understand felt too cheap, too meaningless in the face of that kind of pain. So she stayed quiet. Dominic took a sip. I killed the men who did it, he said, his voice cold as ice. Every one of them, slowly, painfully. He looked at her, his eyes empty. But it did not bring her back. It did not erase what the kids carry in their eyes. It did not give me one single night of good sleep. The silence stretched again. Then Dominic asked, his voice softer, and you? Vivien looked down at the glass of water in her hands. She thought she would not answer. She thought she would make an excuse and go back to her room. But something about tonight, about this darkness, about the way he had opened himself to her, made her want to speak. My husband, she began, her voice so small it was almost a whisper. He did not hit me at first. At first it was only words. She turned the ring on her finger. Then it was slaps, then fists. Then every night was hell. Dominic did not move. He did not interrupt. He only listened. I was pregnant twice, Vivien went on, her voice trembling. The first time, I lost the baby after he shoved me down the stairs. The second time, she stopped and swallowed. I was on the bathroom floor, blood everywhere. He was in the next room watching television. He said I was not worth the money for a hospital. She let out a bitter, hollow laugh. After that, he threw me out because I could not give him a child, as if it were my fault, as if I were a broken thing. She lifted her head, eyes red but not crying. He took everything, money, friends, family, confidence, until I believed I truly had no value. Dominic set his glass down on the table. He looked at her, and his eyes were not empty anymore. There was something there, understanding, respect, and maybe something else. You are stronger than you think, Vivien. She startled at the sound of her name. It was the first time he had called her by it. Not the woman, not you. You survived it, he said. You left. You are still standing here. That is not weakness. That is strength. Their eyes held in the dark, two strangers with different wounds, and yet somehow they understood each other, without many words, without explanations, only the knowledge that someone had seen them, truly seen them, and did not turn away. That night, when Vivien returned to her room, she did not have nightmares. For the first time in a long time, she felt a little lighter, as if speaking had lifted a small part of the weight from her shoulders, and when she closed her eyes, the last image in her mind was not Tyler. It was Dominic's dark brown eyes, looking at her in the darkness, and telling her she was strong. A month passed. Everything began to change, in small ways, the kind you might miss if you were not paying attention. But Vivien noticed, piece by piece. Leo no longer called her Miss Vivien. The 4-year-old with his wild curls and his gap-toothed grin had switched to Vivi. And every night before bed he would tug on her hand, those big round eyes pleading, "Vivi, read to me. I want a superhero story." And Vivien would sit beside his bed and read about heroes who saved the world, while Leo curled beneath the blankets, eyes shining until sleep finally took him. Bella changed too. She no longer hid behind doors to watch. Now she would sit beside Vivien in the living room, quietly drawing while Vivien read a book. And Bella's pictures began to include one more person, a brown-haired woman standing near the large house, standing beside 3 children. Vivien found those drawings on her table each morning. Bella never said who it was, but Vivien knew. And Marco, he was still quiet, still kept his distance, but something had shifted since that afternoon in the garden. He did not ignore her completely anymore. Sometimes he asked her about homework, short questions without emotion, but they were questions, and that was progress. Vivien answered each one patiently, without showing too much excitement, without making it into a big thing. She knew Marco would retreat if she tried too hard. Then one evening, Rosa suggested something unexpected. "Why do we not cook pasta together?" she said, looking around the living room where the whole family was sitting, like we used to. No one spoke for a few seconds. Vivien looked at Dominic, uneasy. She knew what "like we used to" meant. It meant when Lucia was still alive. But Dominic nodded, slowly. Leo cheered. "Cooking. I want to make garlic bread." Bella lifted her head from the half-finished drawing, her eyes brightening just a little. Marco said nothing, but he did not protest either. He stood and followed everyone into the kitchen, and so they cooked, together, for the first time since Lucia died. Rosa guided them, but she let the children do most of it. Leo was given the job of stirring the tomato sauce, and the result was a boy smeared red from nose to forehead, looking like a tiny warrior returned from battle. Bella decorated the plates with the focus of an artist, arranging basil leaves into the shape of flowers, and Marco stood by the stove, watching the pot of boiling water, his face serious as if he were handling the most important mission of his life. Vivien helped Rosa with the salad, but she could not take her eyes off the children. She watched Leo giggle when sauce splattered his face. She watched Bella smile at her own creation, and she saw something she could hardly believe. Marco smiled, just for a moment, the corner of his mouth lifting when he looked at his little brother covered in sauce. But it was a smile, the first one she had seen on his face. Dinner unfolded with laughter and voices. Leo told a story about an imaginary turtle he was raising. Bella showed off a new picture. Even Marco added a few words about the book he was reading, and Dominic, the powerful, cold man, sat there watching his children with a rare softness in his eyes. After dinner, when the children were asleep, Vivien stood at the sink washing dishes. She heard footsteps, then someone stopped beside her. Dominic. He picked up a towel and began drying the plates she had just washed. They stood shoulder to shoulder in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, warm. "Thank you," he said quietly, not looking at her, "for giving them this." Vivien did not understand. This what? He paused, staring out the kitchen window, where the garden lights blinked in the night. The laughter, the warmth, a family. He turned to look at her, his eyes deep. "I forgot what this felt like. I thought this house would stay silent forever." Vivien felt warmth spread through her chest, not from the hot water, from something else, something she had believed was dead a long time ago. "I did not do anything," she said softly. "You stayed," Dominic answered. "That is all we needed." That night, when Vivien returned to her room, she stood before the mirror. The woman looking back at her was still thin, still had the scar on her wrist, still carried wounds that had not healed, but something was different. Her eyes were no longer empty. Her cheeks held more color, and on her lips was a small smile she had not realized she was wearing. "This is who I could become," she thought, her fingers touching the surface of the glass. "If I allow myself." The weeks that followed passed in a gentle calm. Vivien settled into life with the Rossi family as if she had always belonged there. Every morning she woke while the sky was still dim, went down to the kitchen, and prepared meals alongside Rosa. The two women worked side by side in a comfortable silence, sometimes exchanging a few words about the day's menu or the children's habits. Rosa no longer looked at her with a measuring gaze. She looked at her the way you look at someone who is family. In the afternoons, Vivien picked the children up from school. Leo was always the first to run to the car, climbing into her arms and talking without stopping about what happened at school. Bella came out more slowly, holding a newly drawn picture, offering it to Vivien with a shy smile. Marco walked out last, nodded a greeting to her, then got into the car in silence. Not many words, but no longer cold. Evenings belonged to fairy tales and lullabies. Vivien read to Leo until the little boy fell sound asleep, checked Bella's homework and praised her newest drawings, then paused at Marco's door to wish him good night. He did not answer, but she knew he heard her, and that was enough. Dominic began coming home for dinner more often. Before, he used to stay at the office until late, missing family meals, but now he tried to be home before 7, sitting at the table with the children and asking about their day. Dinner grew louder. There was Leo's laughter, Bella talking about a new friend at school, even Marco adding a few words about the book he was reading, and the late-night conversations between Vivien and Dominic became a habit. After the children were asleep, they met in the kitchen, shared a cup of tea or a glass of liquor, and talked about everything and nothing, about the children, about work, about books, about dreams that had been lost. They did not touch the painful past anymore, but the understanding remained, like an invisible thread tying them together. One evening, while Vivien was reading to Leo, the boy suddenly asked if Vivi could stay here forever. Vivien stopped and looked into the big round eyes waiting for an answer, and her heart tightened. She asked why he was asking. "Because I like having Vivi here," Leo said, with a sadness that surprised her. "Everyone else leaves. I do not want Vivi to leave." Vivien bent down and kissed his forehead and told him Vivi was not going anywhere. The next day, Bella gave her a drawing, the biggest she had ever made, on a large sheet of drawing paper, carefully colored. It showed a large house with a green garden. In front of it were 5 people, a tall, black-haired man, 3 children with radiant smiles, and a brown-haired woman standing in the middle, holding the children's hands. "This is our family," Bella said softly. "Vivi is in it." Vivien pressed the drawing to her chest, her eyes burning. Marco still kept his distance, but he was no longer a wall. He did not call her Vivi like his little brother did, but he spoke to her, asked about homework, sometimes shared about the book he was reading, and once, when Vivien caught a cold, he quietly left a cup of hot tea outside her door without saying a word. Vivien began to forget the past. The nights of being beaten faded little by little. Tyler's face no longer haunted her sleep every night. She began to hope that maybe, at last, she had found where she belonged. But the past did not forget her. One afternoon, while Vivien was playing with the children in the garden, Rosa came out, her face gone pale. She held a phone in her hand and looked at Vivien with worry. Vivien asked what was wrong and stood up. Rosa did not answer. She only handed her the phone. A message from an unknown number. Just one line. "Tell her I have found her." Vivien felt the blood in her body turn to ice. The phone nearly slipped from her hand. She knew who sent it. She did not need to look at the number, did not need confirmation. Tyler. He had found her, and the peace she thought she had finally earned shattered in an instant, as fragile as a soap bubble. One afternoon at the park, after that frightening message, Dominic increased security. But he did not want the children locked inside the house like prisoners. So when Leo begged to go, Vivien agreed on the condition that Vin come with them. She told herself she might be imagining things, that maybe the message had only been a threat, that Tyler was in Pennsylvania, hundreds of miles away, and he could not have found her that fast, but she was wrong. The park that afternoon lay peaceful beneath a pale golden sun. Leo ran across the grass, chasing pigeons as they pecked for food, his laughter bright and clear. Bella sat beside a flower bed, carefully picking wild daisies and arranging them into a small bouquet. Marco sat on a stone bench in the shade, reading a thick book, lifting his eyes now and then to check on his brother and sister. Vin stood a few yards away, scanning the park with the sharp attention of a hawk. Vivien sat on the bench beside Marco, watching the children play, trying to let her shoulders loosen, trying to breathe. But something felt wrong, a strange sensation, as if someone were watching her. She tried to ignore it. Maybe it was only her imagination. Maybe she was too tense after the message the day before, but the feeling did not fade. It grew stronger, like an invisible hand tightening at the back of her neck. She turned around, and her heart stopped. Tyler stood only a few yards away, leaning against a tree with his hands in his pockets, a poisonous smile on his mouth. He looked no different from the day she left. The same neatly combed blonde hair, the same expensive suit, the same ice-cold blue eyes, the same nightmare, made of flesh and bone. Her legs wanted to run, but her body would not move. She froze in place like a deer caught in a truck's headlights, and every memory she had tried to bury came rushing back like a tidal wave. Nights of being hit, the insults, blood on the bathroom floor, the sound of a door locking behind her. Tyler walked toward her, slow and certain, as if he owned the entire world. "Hello, my darling wife," he said, his voice sweet enough to make her sick. "Did you miss me?" Vivien could not speak. Her throat felt dry and bitter, her tongue stiff. All she could do was stand there trembling while the nightmare of her life moved closer. But before Tyler could come any nearer, a large figure stepped between them. Vin. The bald man stood like a fortress, his gaze hard and cold as he stared straight at Tyler. "Back up," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Tyler gave a short laugh, not the least bit shaken. "Easy, my friend. I just want to talk to my wife." "She is not your wife," Vin replied. Tyler tilted his head, looking past Vin's shoulder at Vivien. "Oh, is that what you told them?" He smiled, and the sound of it was cold. "You are still my wife, Vivien. The paperwork is still there. You still belong to me." Something flared in Vivien's chest, hot and sharp, anger, hatred. She stepped forward, standing beside Vin, her voice shaking but clear. "I do not belong to you. I never did." Tyler lifted an eyebrow, calm on the surface, but something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Then his gaze drifted past her toward the lawn where Leo was playing, where Bella was picking flowers, where Marco was reading. "Cute kids," Tyler said slowly, each word cutting like a blade. It would be a shame if something happened to them. Vivien felt her blood boil. She wanted to lunge at him, to claw at that face, to scream that he would not touch the children. But Vin moved faster. He shoved Tyler back, firm but controlled, not enough to draw attention. "Leave," Vin growled, "right now, or I will make you disappear, permanently." Tyler raised both hands and gave a thin smile. All right. I am leaving." But before he turned away, he looked at Vivien one last time. "I will see you again soon, my darling wife." Then he walked off, unhurried, as if he had only been out for a stroll. Vivien stood there, her legs shaking so badly she almost collapsed. Vin immediately made a call and ordered a car to come at once. He guided Vivien and the children out of the park, his steps quick but not panicked. In the car, Vivien sat in silence, trembling uncontrollably. Tears slid down her face without her noticing. The children watched her with worry. Bella clutched her bouquet of wildflowers, her eyes red. Marco looked at Vivien, his face tight with tension, but the coldness was gone. In his eyes was real concern. Then a small hand reached for hers. Leo. The 4-year-old looked at her with wide eyes, his lower lip trembling. "Do not cry, Vivi. We will protect Vivi." Vivien looked at him, then at Bella quietly crying, then at Marco trying to be strong, and she understood something. She was not fighting alone anymore. She had people to protect, and she had people who were willing to protect her. That night, Dominic came home early. Vin had called him the moment they left the park and reported everything. Vivien heard the car stop at the gate, the quick steps across stone, the low sound of Dominic's voice asking Rosa where the children were. She did not go downstairs to see him. She could not. She was curled into herself on her bed in her room, the blanket pulled up to her chin, her body still trembling even though hours had passed. Tyler's face flashed in front of her every time she closed her eyes. His voice echoed in her head like a curse. "You still belong to me. I will see you again soon." A knock came at the door, gentle, not demanding. Vivien did not answer, but the door opened anyway. Dominic stepped inside, his tall frame filling the doorway. He did not turn on the light. He did not ask if she was all right. He only walked to the side of the bed and sat down, his back against the frame, his eyes on the window where moonlight poured in. Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, not pushing, just presence. He was here. He would wait. Then Vivien began to speak. She did not know why. Maybe the darkness made it easier. Maybe she had held it in too long. Maybe she trusted him. "Tyler Brennan," she began, her voice rough and raw. "My husband. 4 years. Dominic did not turn toward her. He did not interrupt. He only listened. And she told him everything. About the first day they met, When Tyler was still a charming young lawyer with a perfect smile, about the way he slowly isolated her from friends, family, everyone, about the first time he hit her, only because she came home 15 minutes late, about the nights that followed when the punches became more frequent, when the insults turned into a daily refrain. Useless, ugly, no one else wants you, you should be grateful I still keep you. She told him about the 2 pregnancies. The first time she lost the baby after Tyler shoved her down the stairs in a rage. The second time when she lay on the bathroom floor, blood pouring and pouring, while Tyler sat in the next room watching television, saying she was not worth hospital money. She told him about the last night, when he screamed in her face that she was worthless, that she could not give him a child, then threw her out of the house like broken property. Her voice broke, tears soaked into the pillow. But she kept going, because once she started, she could not stop. She needed someone to know. She needed someone to see the wounds she had hidden for too long. She sat up and pulled back her sleeve, revealing the scar on her wrist, faint but still there, like a permanent reminder. That night he squeezed so hard I nearly broke a bone, she whispered. The bruise never really healed. Dominic turned toward her. In the moonlight she could see his face, his jaw clenched tight, his eyes dark as a moonless night. Not pity, but fury, the cold rage of a man familiar with violence, holding himself back from exploding. He will not touch you again, he said, his voice low like distant thunder. I swear it on my life. Vivien shook her head, exhausted. You do not understand. He is dangerous. He has money, lawyers, connections. He will not stop. He will never leave me alone. Dominic looked at her, his gaze steady. I have money too. I have lawyers too. I have connections too. He leaned closer, his voice ice cold but hard as steel. And I do not play by the rules. Vivien looked at him, her heart beating slow inside her chest. She knew who he was. She knew what he did. She knew his world was dangerous and dark. But in this moment, in a room filled with moonlight, she was not afraid. For the first time, she felt someone was on her side, someone willing to fight for her. Then he did something she did not expect. He reached out and gently took her hand, the hand with the scar, the trembling hand, the hand that had endured too much. He held it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. You are safe here, he said, and his voice softened just slightly. You are mine to protect now. Vivien looked into his eyes, at his hand holding hers, warm, steady, real. And for the first time since Tyler appeared, she let herself believe that maybe everything would be all right. In the days that followed, Tyler did not disappear. He lingered like a ghost, always somewhere just out of reach, yet close enough for Vivien to feel him. First came the flowers. A bouquet of deep red roses appeared at the mansion gate with a card that carried no signature. For my darling wife. The gate guard stopped it and alerted Vin. The bouquet was thrown away at once. But the message had already landed where Tyler wanted it to. He knew exactly where she was, and he wanted her to know that he knew. Then came the email. Rosa found it in the estate inbox. The address used for vendors and service calls, an anonymous sender, a single line, you can run, but you cannot hide. Vivien felt sick as she read it, because she recognized that tone, the way Tyler spoke when he wanted to wear her down. Slowly, patiently, like a cat playing with a mouse before it killed. But the worst came on the third day. A thick envelope appeared in the outdoor mailbox by the gate, no return address, and inside were photographs. Vivien at the park, sitting beside Marco. Vivien watching Leo run and laugh. Vivien talking to Bella. The angle told her the photographer had been close enough that it made her skin go cold, close enough that she had never even sensed it. And in the final photo, someone had circled the faces of the 3 children in red ink. Vivien nearly fainted when she saw it. Dominic reacted immediately. Security doubled, more guards at the gate, more cameras on every corner, more patrol cars circling the property, and the children were forbidden to leave the house unless at least 2 people went with them. The school was notified, strangers were not allowed near, and the mansion became a fortress in truth. The children felt that something was wrong. Leo was too young to understand, but he sensed the tension in the air and clung to Vivien more than ever. Bella grew quiet, startled at loud noises, and Marco watched everything with eyes older than his years. One evening, while Vivien sat alone in the living room, Marco came in and stood there for a moment, as if weighing whether he should speak at all. Then he asked, his voice small but direct, "Someone is trying to hurt us, aren't they, like what happened to Mom?" Vivien looked up, pain cutting sharp through her chest, and she met the gaze of a 9-year-old boy who had lost his mother to violence, who had been forced to grow up too fast, who carried a fear no child should ever have to carry. She did not want to lie to him. He deserved the truth, at least a piece of it. "There is someone from my past," she said slowly. "He is trying to find me, but your father will not let anything happen. To you, to your brother and sister, to anyone." Marco looked at her, and his eyes were no longer as cold as before. Something else lived there now. Worry, care, and maybe something that felt like love. "We will not let anything happen to you either," he said. And then he paused as if pushing through an invisible barrier inside himself. Vivien felt tears rise. For the first time Marco used the name Leo and Bella had always used. For the first time he admitted she was part of this family. She did not speak. She only nodded, fighting to hold back the rush of feeling. Marco said nothing more. He simply sat down beside her in silence, as if his presence was enough. And for Vivien it was more than enough. That night, Dominic called her into his office. A thick stack of documents sat on his desk. "I had my people investigate him," he said, pushing the stack toward her. "Tyler Brennan, lawyer." But not only that. Vivien scanned the pages, police reports, medical records, witness statements, and her heart began to pound harder as she read. "He has a history of abusing 2 other women before you," Dominic said. "Both withdrew their complaints because they were threatened. He also owes gambling debts, and he is under investigation for financial fraud. His law firm is close to bankruptcy." Vivien looked up at him. "What does that mean?" "It means he is desperate," Dominic replied. "He needs money. Maybe he thinks you can give it to him, or he wants revenge because you left. Whatever it is, he will not stop." He stepped closer, his expression serious and decisive. "We are going to end this. You have 2 choices. We do it his way, or we do it through the law. Which do you want?" Vivien looked at him, into those dark brown eyes waiting for her answer. She knew what his way meant. She knew Dominic could make Tyler vanish forever. But she also knew what she wanted. She wanted to face her past, and she wanted to win with her own strength. Vivien thought all night. She lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, letting memory roll in like a tide. 4 years with Tyler, 4 years of fear, 4 years of enduring, 4 years of silence. She remembered the first time he hit her, the sudden slap that knocked her to the floor, and then how he dropped to his knees to apologize, swearing he would never do it again. She had believed him. She remembered the times that followed, when the apologies disappeared and were replaced by blame. "You make me do this. It is your fault. Always your fault." She remembered how she learned to move softly, speak quietly, do everything to avoid provoking him. How she made herself smaller still, until she almost vanished. Then she thought of her mother, the woman who had given her this silver ring, the woman who had also endured a painful marriage, with a different man but the same kind of violence. Her mother never left. Her mother endured until the day she collapsed, her body exhausted, her spirit shattered. She died in silence, the way she had lived. Vivien clenched the ring in her fist, feeling the edge of metal press into her skin. "I will not become my mother," she thought, each word ringing clear inside her. "I will not die in silence." In the morning she went down to Dominic's office. He sat behind the desk, waiting, as if he already knew she would come. "The law," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "I want to face him, with my own strength." Dominic looked at her for a long moment, not surprised, not disappointed, only respect in his eyes. He nodded. "All right." He called a lawyer that same day, a middle-aged woman named Margaret Collins, gray hair, sharp eyes, with a reputation as one of the best domestic violence attorneys in Chicago. She sat across from Vivien, listened to everything, and wrote down each detail with careful precision. "You need evidence," she said, "as much as possible." And Vivien had it. She still had medical records from hospital visits, the times she had lied to doctors and said she fell down the stairs. She still had photographs of bruises and injuries, taken in secret on nights Tyler slept, not knowing why she had taken them, except that some part of her had always known there would come a day she would need them. And she still had the diary she had kept for 4 years, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the bathroom, the one place Tyler never looked. Every page was a day, every line was a wound, every word was a silent cry for help. Attorney Collins reviewed the evidence and nodded. "It is enough to put him in prison," she said, "and enough for you to get a permanent restraining order." While Vivien prepared for the legal fight, Dominic handled things in his own way. He did not tell her, But she knew. Tyler was suddenly under investigation by the tax authorities for suspected evasion. Information about financial fraud at his law firm began to leak. Clients left. Partners pulled funding. The press started digging. Tyler Brennan, the promising lawyer, was slowly collapsing. Vivien did not ask Dominic what he had done. She did not need to know. She only needed to know he was on her side. One afternoon, while Vivien sat in the living room reviewing documents with the attorney, Bella walked in. The little girl held a large sheet of paper and came to Vivien with eyes that were shy but determined. "I drew this for Vivi," she whispered, holding it out. Vivien took it, and her breath caught. The drawing showed 5 people standing in front of a large house, a tall black-haired man, 3 children with radiant smiles, and a brown-haired woman in the middle holding the children's hands. But what stopped Vivien's voice in her throat was the scribbled line across the top in red crayon. "Our angel." Tears spilled over. Vivien could not hold them back. She cried, but not from pain, not from fear, from the feeling of being loved, being accepted, being called an angel by children who had lost their mother, children who had locked their hearts against the world. Bella panicked when she saw Vivien crying. "Vivi is sad. I am sorry. I did not want to make Vivi sad." Vivien pulled her into her arms and held her tight. "No, sweetheart. Vivi is not sad. Vivi is happy. This is the most beautiful picture Vivi has ever received." The next day, Vivien signed her name on the complaint, filing against Tyler Brennan for domestic violence, intentional assault, and threats against her life. Attorney Collins submitted it to the court, and the fight began. The day of court. Vivien woke before dawn, her stomach tight with stress. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at the navy suit Dominic had bought for her. The fabric was soft, the tailoring precise, fitted as if it had been measured just for her. She put it on, fastening each button one by one, feeling the cloth settle over her like armor. She was not the ragged woman curled up at the bus station that night anymore. She was the woman who would face her nightmare, and she would not back down. The courtroom was cold and solemn. The ceiling was high, the walls dark oak, and harsh artificial light pressed down and made the air feel heavy. Hard wooden benches sat in rows. The judge sat above them all like an instrument of judgment, and the American flag stood silent in the corner. Vivien walked in, her heart pounding against her ribs. Attorney Collins moved beside her, calm and professional. Behind Vivien, she knew Dominic was seated in the back row, his eyes on her even though she did not turn to look. Then she saw him. Tyler sat at the defense table in an expensive gray suit, hair neatly combed, chin lifted. 2 attorneys sat beside him, the best money could buy. Even under investigation, even with his firm collapsing, Tyler still carried the confidence of a man used to getting what he wanted. When Vivien passed, he looked up. Ice-cold blue eyes held her with that familiar contempt, the corner of his mouth lifted in a small, defiant smile, as if to say she had no chance. Vivien felt the old chill slide up her spine, but she did not lower her head. She did not look away. She met his gaze and walked to her seat. The hearing began. Tyler's lawyer spoke first, voice smooth as syrup. He denied every allegation. There was no abuse, no threats. Vivien Cole was mentally unstable, with a history of depression, who had abandoned her home for no reason. "My client is the victim here," the attorney said. "His wife cheated, ran off, and is now trying to smear a good man for personal gain." Vivien felt heat rush to her face. Cheating, mentally unstable. The familiar lies Tyler had always used to control her. Attorney Collins rose without a flicker of emotion. "I call the primary witness, Vivien Cole." Vivien stood. Her legs felt like they were made of lead, but she walked to the witness stand. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth and only the truth. Then she sat, facing the courtroom. Her hands trembled, but her voice held steady. She began to tell it, from the beginning, from the wedding day when she believed she was the happiest woman in the world, to the first night he hit her when she was too shocked to believe it had happened, to the years that followed when violence became ordinary, when she learned to hide bruises with makeup, when she learned to lie to doctors, lie to family, lie even to herself. She spoke of the 2 pregnancies. Her voice caught when she spoke of the first child, lost after being shoved down the stairs, and the second, lost while she lay alone on the bathroom floor while her husband sat in the next room watching television and said she was not worth hospital money. The courtroom fell silent. Attorney Collins submitted evidence, medical records from 5 hospital admissions, photographs of injuries, diary pages recording each day of hell. The judge examined each document, face unreadable, eyes growing darker as the record built. Then witnesses were called. First came Martha, an old neighbor in Pennsylvania. Trembling, she told the court about nights she heard screaming from next door, the crash of breaking objects, the strangled sound of crying. "I called the police twice," she said, "but when they came, she always said everything was fine. I knew it was not fine. I just did not know what else to do." Next came two other women, Jennifer and Amanda, former partners of Tyler, who had also been victims. Their stories matched in a way that made the room go cold. The same kind of violence, the same kind of control, the same kind of blame. Tyler began to lose his composure. Vivien saw it in the way he sat straighter, in the way his fingers tapped the table, in the way his jaw clenched hard. The perfect mask was cracking, and when Amanda described the night he nearly choked her to death, Tyler snapped. He shot to his feet, face flushed, eyes locked on Vivien. "She is lying," he shouted, his voice echoing through the courtroom. "All of them are lying. She is nothing. She belongs to me." The courtroom erupted into murmurs. Tyler's attorneys tried to pull him down, but he shoved them off. He pointed at Vivien, his eyes wild. "You are mine, Vivien. You will always be mine." The judge struck the gavel, the crack like thunder. Silence. "The defendant will sit down immediately or be removed." Tyler stood there panting, chest heaving, and then he sat, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it, his true face, the madness, the sick ownership, the rage he had hidden behind polished charm for years. Vivien looked at him, and for the first time, she was not afraid. She only saw a pathetic man collapsing in front of everyone. The courtroom sat in silence, waiting. After Tyler's outburst, the judge had called a recess to consider the ruling. Now everyone was back in place, the air heavy the way it gets before a storm breaks. Vivien sat in the front row, spine straight, hands clasped tight on her lap. She could feel Dominic behind her, his presence like an invisible source of strength. Tyler sat at the defense table, composed again on the surface, but Vivien could see the strain in the corded tendons of his neck, in the slight slump of his shoulders. For the first time, he was not the one in control. He was the one being judged. The judge entered, a gray-haired man with a stern face shaped by thousands of cases. Everyone rose, then sat when he took his seat. He opened the file, scanned it one last time, and looked up. "The court has reviewed all evidence and testimony," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "in the matter of Cole versus Brennan for domestic violence, intentional assault, and threats against life." Vivien's heart missed a beat. "The court finds the defendant, Tyler Brennan, guilty. Guilty." The word rang through Vivien like a bell. Guilty, after 4 years of hell, after 2 lost babies, after countless nights of terror. Someone had finally spoken the truth out loud. Tyler went still. The color drained from his face as if the blood had been pulled right out of him. His blue eyes widened in disbelief. For the first time in her life, Vivien saw real fear on his face. The judge continued, his tone unmoved. "The defendant is sentenced to 5 years in prison for aggravated domestic violence and intentional assault. In addition, the court issues a permanent restraining order and grants the plaintiff's petition for an immediate dissolution of marriage. The defendant is forbidden to approach the plaintiff, Vivien Cole, under any circumstance, directly or indirectly, for the rest of his life." Tyler stammered something to his attorneys, but there was nothing left to do. Court officers stepped forward and cuffed him. The sound of metal clicking echoed in the quiet room. As they led him past Vivien, Tyler paused for the briefest moment. He stared at her, and now his blue eyes were filled with hatred, sharp and poisonous, a look that promised that if he ever had the chance he would never forgive her. Before, that look would have made her shrink, would have made her want to disappear, would have made her believe she deserved every terrible thing. But today, Vivien stood tall. She met his eyes without shaking, without fear, without lowering her head. Then she spoke, her voice low, meant only for him. "You do not own me anymore." She let the words settle before she finished. "You never owned me." Tyler's eye twitched, his jaw tightened. He wanted to say something, to shout, to make her afraid the way he had so many times before, but the officers pushed him forward. Vivien watched his back vanish through the door, and she felt a massive weight lift from her shoulders. Court was over. People began to file out. Attorney Collins shook Vivien's hand and congratulated her on the victory. Reporters tried to get close, but Vin blocked them. Vivien barely saw any of it. She moved like someone sleepwalking, out of the courtroom, down the long corridor, to a small empty corner by a window. And there, alone, she cried. Tears streamed without stopping, But these were not tears of pain, not tears of despair. They were tears of relief, of release, of someone who had just been set free after years of captivity. She cried for the young girl who believed in love and was betrayed. She cried for the 2 children who would never be born. She cried for the terrifying nights, the bruises, the insults. She cried for everything she had lost, and for everything she had just taken back. A door opened softly. She did not turn, but she knew who it was. Then came the quick patter of little feet. Leo ran to her and wrapped his arms around her legs. Vivi won. Bella followed, her eyes red as if she had been crying too, and she held out a crushed wildflower she had kept in her pocket all day. And Marco, the 9-year-old with eyes too old for his age, stepped forward. He did not say much. He simply reached out and took Vivien's hand. "You won, Vivi," he said, his voice small but steady. "You won." Vivien looked down at the 3 children gathered around her, then lifted her eyes to Dominic standing in the doorway, warmth and pride in his gaze. She had won. Not only against Tyler, but against fear, against silence, against the part of herself that once believed she did not deserve happiness. And for the first time in her life, Vivien Cole felt free. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. They had been waiting at the gate, cameras and microphones aimed at the main doors like weapons poised to strike. When Vivien stepped out, flashbulbs exploded in rapid bursts, and questions came flying like hail. "Miss Cole, how do you feel? Do you have a message for other victims of abuse? What is your next step? What is your relationship to the Rossi family?" Vivien blinked against the harsh light, her feet faltering on the steps. She was not used to being seen. For 4 years, she had learned how to make herself invisible. Now the whole world was staring. But before panic could take her, a small body darted forward. Leo, the 4-year-old, slipped between grown-up legs and ran straight to her, wrapping his arms tight around her knees. "Vivi is so brave," he shouted, his clear little voice ringing through the crowd. Like a superhero, reporters tilted their cameras down, snapping pictures of the boy clinging to her. A few people smiled. The tension softened, just a little. Bella came next, more hesitant, big round eyes taking in the crowd with worry. But she still walked to Vivien's side and held out a wildflower that had begun to wilt, the one she had kept all day. "For Vivi," she whispered. "Because Vivi won." Vivien bent to take the flower, her eyes burning. A small wild daisy, its petals crumpled, but it was the most beautiful gift she had ever received. Then Marco stepped forward. The 9-year-old stood tall, shoulders open, chin lifted. He looked straight into the cameras without shaking, without fear, as if he were ready to face the whole world. "She is not afraid," Marco said, his voice clear and steady. "She is our family now." The reporters fell silent for a beat. Then the shutters started again, louder than before. They photographed the 3 children standing around Vivien like tiny bodyguards, faces set with determination, ready to protect the woman they had chosen as family. But Vivien did not look at the reporters. She looked back to where Dominic stood. He did not step forward. He did not steal the spotlight. He simply stood there in a black suit, hands in his pockets, dark brown eyes on her. No smile, only warmth, pride, and something deeper she was not yet brave enough to name. He gave her a small nod, just one, but it was all she needed. Vin cleared a path through the crowd and led them to the waiting car. Vivien lifted Leo into her arms, took Bella's hand, and followed. Marco walked beside her, glancing at the reporters now and then with the wary look of a grown man trapped inside a child's body. When the car door shut, the noise outside vanished at once, leaving only quiet. No one spoke. No one had to. The air inside the car felt like release, as if all of them had finally exhaled after holding their breath for too long. Leo rested his head against Vivien, worn out after the long day, his eyes slipping closed. Bella sat close, still gripping Vivien's hand, refusing to let go. Marco sat up front, silent, staring out the window, but his shoulders had loosened, no longer rigid the way they usually were. The Escalade moved smoothly through the streets of Chicago. Vivien watched the city slide past the window. Tall buildings, bare trees, pedestrians hurrying along the sidewalks. Everything looked the same as it always had. But for her, everything was different. She did not have to run anymore. She did not have to look over her shoulder for someone following. She did not have to wake in the night with her heart pounding wild from fear. Tyler was behind bars, and she was here, with people who loved her. For the first time in her life, she felt free, truly free, not the freedom of escaping, but the freedom of someone who had faced the nightmare and won. A hand touched hers gently. She turned. Dominic sat beside her, his gaze soft in the darkness of the car. "Welcome home," he said quietly. "Home." The word warmed her as it echoed in her mind. For the first time in a long time, she had somewhere to go, and she was on her way back to it. In the weeks after the trial, things shifted in subtle ways. Nothing dramatic, no explosive moment, only small changes, like water dripping onto stone, slowly leaving a mark. Dominic started coming home earlier, not once in a while the way he used to, but almost every day. He found reasons to talk to Vivien, to ask about the children, about dinner, about the books she was reading, ordinary questions, but not the way he asked them, not the way he looked at her while she answered, not the way he stood a little closer than necessary. One afternoon, Vivien was in the garden behind the mansion, pulling weeds and watering the rose bushes Lucia had once planted. She did not hear footsteps. She only realized he was there when his shadow fell beside her. Dominic knelt down next to her with pruning shears in his hand. "Let me help," he said, as if a mafia boss tending roses were the most normal thing in the world. They worked side by side in a comfortable silence. Dirt clung to their knees, sweat dotted their foreheads, and neither of them wanted to stop. In the evenings, they cooked together. Rosa was still the heart of the kitchen, but somehow Dominic and Vivien always found something to do beside each other. He washed vegetables while she chopped onions. He stirred the pan while she tasted and adjusted the seasoning. Their shoulders brushed when they passed. Their hands touched when they reached for spoons and plates. Each time it happened, Vivien felt a small current spark across her skin. She did not know if he felt it too, but the way he paused for a heartbeat whenever it happened gave her her answer. After dinner came story time. Before, Vivien had done it alone. Now Dominic sat beside her on the sofa, Leo curled between them, Bella leaning against Vivien's shoulder, Marco in the chair across the room, pretending to read his own book but really listening. They sat close enough that his warmth bled into her, close enough that she could catch the scent of his cologne, sandalwood and something else that belonged only to him, and the looks that lasted a little longer than they should have, when she lifted her eyes and caught him watching her, when he looked away, but not fast enough, when their eyes met, and neither of them wanted to be the first to let go. One night, after the children were asleep, Dominic led her into the large living room where a glossy black grand piano sat silent in the corner. "This was Lucia's," he said, his fingers brushing the lid. "She liked to play every night. Since she died, no one has touched it." He sat on the bench and patted the empty space beside him. "Let me teach you." Vivien sat down, her heart beating faster for a reason she did not want to name. Dominic began to play a soft melody, an Italian piece Lucia had loved. His fingers moved across the keys with the ease of someone who had played it 1,000 times. "Try," he told her. Vivien placed her hands on the keys, clumsy. She did not know how to play. She did not know where to begin. Then his hand covered hers, gentle, warm, guiding her fingers into the right place. "Like this?" he said, his voice lower than usual. Vivien could not focus on the piano anymore. All she could feel was the heat of his hand, the nearness of his body beside her, the soft brush of his breath against her hair. Something moved between them, powerful and undeniable. They both felt it, but neither of them said it out loud. The children began to notice, or rather, the children began to say what the adults were trying not to. One evening at dinner, Leo suddenly asked, "Vivi, are you going to marry Dad?" Vivien nearly choked on her water. Dominic set his fork down, his expression unreadable. "What?" "Dad and Vivi look at each other like a prince and a princess in my book," Leo said with complete innocence. "Like this." He widened his eyes and blinked dramatically. Bella covered her mouth, giggling. Even Marco had to turn his head to hide a smile. Vivien felt heat rush to her face. She did not dare look at Dominic, but when she stole a glance, she saw color in his cheeks too. It was the first time she had ever seen this powerful man look awkward like a schoolboy. "Leo, you should not ask that," Rosa intervened gently, though her eyes sparkled with mischief. Dinner continued in embarrassment, but the air was not heavy. It was warm and full of hope. That night, after Vivien returned to her room, she heard footsteps stop outside her door. She knew who it was. She could feel his presence through the wood, standing there, perhaps hesitating, perhaps deciding whether he should knock. Her heart raced. She wanted to open the door. She wanted to see him, but she did not, and he did not knock. After a while, the footsteps moved away. They both knew what was happening between them. They were simply not ready to say it yet. Not yet, but soon. One late spring evening, The children were asleep. The mansion lay in silence, with only the chirping of crickets in the garden and moonlight spilling through the windows. Vivien sat in the living room reading when Dominic appeared in the doorway. He was not wearing a suit the way he usually did, only a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly mussed as if he had dragged a hand through it too many times. "Could you come out to the garden with me for a little while?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Vivien closed her book, her heart beginning to race for reasons she could not name, and she nodded, rising to follow him. The garden behind the mansion looked like a dream. Tiny strands of lights shimmered over the rose bushes, casting a warm golden glow across the night. The flowers were in full bloom, their sweetness thick in the air. This was the garden Lucia had once tended, now brought back to life by Vivien's hands over the past months. They walked in silence, shoulders nearly touching, footsteps light on the stone path. Vivien could feel tension in Dominic's body, the way he drew deep breaths, the way his fingers clenched and released as if he were preparing for something. Then he stopped beneath the large maple tree where Marco had once sat staring at his mother's photograph. He turned to her, his dark brown eyes deep under the garden lights. 3 years, he began, his voice low and slow. 3 years since Lucia died. I have lived like a walking corpse. I wake up, I work, I come home, I look at the kids, and I repeat. No feeling, no hope, only responsibility and guilt. Vivien listened without interrupting. I am tired, he continued. Tired from trying to do everything alone. Tired from pretending to be strong for the children while I am falling apart inside. I feel like I am sinking, deeper every day, and no one can pull me back up. He looked at her, and something softened in his gaze. Then you came, broken, like me, carrying wounds that hurt even more than mine. And somehow, you put us back together. Vivien shook her head gently. I did not do anything, I just stayed. Dominic stepped closer by a single pace. That is exactly what we needed. Someone who stays. Someone who does not run when she learns who we are. Someone who sees the children as children, not as a mafia boss's sons and daughter. Someone who sees me as a man, not as a criminal. Vivien's heart hammered so hard she was afraid he could hear it. Dominic stood in front of her now, close enough that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the fine lines near his eyes. I do not need a nanny anymore, he said, his voice low and certain. I do not need someone to help raise my children. Vivien swallowed. Then what do you need? Dominic held her gaze. A partner, someone who walks beside me. In this life, in this darkness, I know I am not perfect. I know my world is dangerous. I know I do not deserve someone like you, but I am selfish. I want you to stay. He reached for her hand and took it, gentle, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Stay. Not as an employee, but as mine, as the children's, as ours. Vivien felt tears rise. She looked into the eyes of the man standing before her, the man who had saved her on that freezing night, who had given her a home, a family, a reason to keep going. She opened her mouth to answer, and then the back door flew open with a loud bang. Say yes, Vivi, 3 voices shouted at once. Leo burst out first, in socks and superhero pajamas. Bella followed, clutching her stuffed bear, eyes shining, and Marco stood in the doorway, arms crossed, but his mouth was curved in a smile. We heard everything, Leo yelled, running to hug Vivien's legs. Dad loves Vivi. Vivi has to say yes. Dominic looked at the children, torn between annoyance and amusement. I told you to go to sleep. We could not sleep, Bella said softly, stepping closer. We wanted to know if Vivi is staying forever. Marco finally moved forward to stand with his brother and sister. He looked at Vivien, his gaze steady for someone so young. You are our family already, Vivi, he said. You just have to say it out loud. Vivien looked at the 3 children watching her with pleading eyes, then at Dominic standing there, still holding her hand, hope and a trace of worry in his eyes, and she knew the answer. She had known it for a long time. Vivien looked at the children, looked at Dominic, and smiled through her tears. 3 small faces waited for her, eyes bright beneath the garden lights, and the man standing in front of her still held her hand, his gaze full of hope and love. She did not need to think any longer. The answer had been living in her heart for a long time. Yes, she said, her voice trembling but steady. Yes, I will. Leo leaped up with both arms raised like he had just scored the winning goal. She said yes. She said yes. Bella rushed in and clung to Vivien's legs, crying and laughing at the same time. And Marco, the 9-year-old who had built a fortress around his heart, finally smiled, Not a tight, polite smile, but a real one, radiant, as if the sun had risen after 3 years of night. Dominic pulled her into his arms and held her close, and she felt his heartbeat racing as fast as her own. The children squeezed into the embrace, turning it into a warm circle of 5. Family. A few weeks later, the wedding took place in the garden behind the mansion. It was not a lavish celebration with hundreds of guests. It was a small, intimate ceremony beneath a honey-gold sunset and strands of twinkling lights. The guests were only Rosa, Vin, a few of Dominic's closest people, and attorney Collins, the woman who had helped Vivien win back her freedom. Vivien wore a simple white dress, no stones, no complicated lace, only soft silk that fell like water and revealed a gentle beauty she had never known she carried. At her throat, her mother's silver ring hung on a delicate chain, resting over her heart. Her mother was not here, but Vivien knew she was watching from somewhere. Before the ceremony began, the 3 children came to her, each carrying a gift. Marco came first. He held out a thin, silver necklace with a small heart charm. "So you will always have something from us," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I bought it with my saved money." Vivien took it, tears spilling over, and she put it on right away beside her mother's ring. Bella came next, holding a handmade flower crown woven from wild daisies and bright ribbons. "Colors for sad days," she said. "When Vivi feels sad, look at this." Vivien placed the crown on her head and felt like a queen. Last came Leo. The 4-year-old ran in, holding up a crown made of cardboard and glitter. "For our queen," he shouted proudly. "I made it. Dad only helped me stick the glitter on." Vivien knelt and wrapped her arms around him. "This is the most beautiful crown in the world." The ceremony began when the sun touched the horizon. Vivien walked across the green lawn with a bouquet of roses from the garden she had tended for months. The 3 children walked ahead, scattering petals. Dominic waited beneath a flower arbor, dressed in a black suit, hair neatly combed, but his eyes softer than they had ever been. When they stood facing each other, the minister asked for their vows. Dominic held her hand and looked straight into her eyes. "I swear I will stand between you and the world, always. I swear I will protect you at any cost, love you in every circumstance, and never leave you alone. You do not have to fight by yourself anymore. From now on, I fight with you." Vivien squeezed his hand, her voice trembling but sure. "I swear I will stay, in the light, in the dark, and in everything in between. I swear I will love these children as my own. I swear I will not run anymore, because for the first time, I have somewhere I belong." The minister pronounced them husband and wife. Dominic bent down and kissed her, gentle, tender, full of promise. Applause rose. Leo cheered. Bella cried. Marco stood there smiling, his eyes wet too, though he would never admit it. That night, after the guests had left, after the children had fallen asleep, Vivien stood alone in the garden. She looked at the mansion glowing with light, where her husband waited, where her children dreamed sweet dreams. She thought of the girl curled up at the bus station on that November night, ragged, hungry, desperate, believing there was nothing left worth living for. Vivien had arrived here with empty hands, broken, hollow, lost, and they had given her everything, not by saving her, but by letting her save herself. Her name was Vivien Rossi now, and for the first time in her life, that name truly belonged to her, because sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the very thing that leads you home. Vivien's story had ended, but its message would keep echoing. This is a story of resilience, of never giving up hope even in the darkest moments. Vivien proved that the past does not define us, that wounds can heal, and that family is not only blood but the people who choose to stay together. If you are going through a hard season, remember you are stronger than you think. Do not be afraid to step out of the dark. Do not be afraid to trust again, and never believe you are not worthy of love. We want to hear your story. How did this story touch your heart? Did it connect to your real life in any way? Share your feelings in the comments below. Every story, every comment you leave is a powerful source of motivation that helps us keep bringing meaningful content. If you found this story moving and meaningful, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, tap like, and share this video with the people you love. Your support helps us continue creating healing stories every day. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish you and your family good health, happiness, and peace in life. Wherever you are, whatever you are facing, remember that after the rain, the sky clears, and every ending is a new beginning. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.